Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. And today we are going to talk about going after a new segment and whether it's actually possible or not. And we are joined by the awesome Anastasia, who, introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show. I'm Anastasia. I'm the founder of B2B Practitioners. We are a boutique go-to-market advisory for tech companies, B2B focused tech companies, mainly working with Series A and B. Before that, I was on the venture capital side for quite some time, working for Project A Ventures as head of marketing. I led the growth marketing team at Central, an ERP system that is funded by Sequoia Capital. Before that, a lot of different stations in startups and scale-ups that had also a bunch of exits to major corporates. And happy to be here.
Lovely to have you. Someone very much more reflective than us once told us that because we work with like seed, Series A, Series B, they're like, you're just masochistic. And we were like, we never thought about it that way. So welcome to the club, Anastasia.
Welcome to join the club.
Welcome to the Masochism Club. As normal, we would love to hear your marketing confessions. So what's something that you fucked up royally that you want to get off your chest and share with us?
Do we have to do this? Well, I once changed the lead scoring in HubSpot and I accidentally pushed it on older contacts as well. So it fucked up the whole kind of MQL, SQL stages quite a bit. So that was my confession. That was not good, but at least you could revert it back. But it was a bit confusing for everyone.
In the moment, it's the panic, isn't it, of like,
Yes.
That's one of the downfalls, I feel, of HubSpot. You can revert stuff, but also like it's not like you're just like click the previous version. Like you have to do a whole thing, which I understand why some people are scared of it and want Salesforce, because Salesforce is a whole other management system for reverting to things. But anyway, I like that one. I don't think we've had a lead score confession before. I think this is a first.
Ooh, okay.
Welcome, Anastasia.
Yeah, welcome.
Yay.
But also, I think it is a good one because I think it's such a common thing that we're all working on. So I think, also they have changed the lead scoring in HubSpot, how you set it up. It's very different these days. I wonder if we could still do that. Maybe I'll try. Who knows? Not with my own data as well, but someone else's. The reason we wanted to talk about this subject, obviously, Anastasia, you're a go-to-market genius. And this is a conversation that happens a lot, especially in startup land. And especially when someone gets a new funding round, I think the initial thought is let's go after a new segment, whether that's if you're in the UK, let's go after the US, or let's go after another industry vertical. There's a lot to do that. And so we wanted to talk through the kind of practicalities of that. So talk to us about when a company decides it wants to go after a new segment, what are some of the first questions they should really be asking themselves about why they want to do it, and what are some of the tactical things they should be thinking through when they do decide to do it?
Yeah, I think the why question is the most important one. I think most of the companies that want to go for a new segment haven't actually exhausted their segment that they're already targeting, right? So I would say, especially if you're early stage, you shouldn't do it. Period.
Love it. Great advice. Don't.
What would you define as early stage?
Obviously, if you're very, very early stage, right? Seed, pre-seed, you first need to define a segment, right? A segment. So not a new segment, but something that you want to focus on. And then once your later stage, Series B, for example, C, then it might make sense to move into a new segment once you've exhausted your existing ones, or once you cross the chasm, to speak in Morse language, in your current segment. So, but the questions that you need to ask, obviously, and this is whether you're going for a segment or a new segment, is how likely can you win the segment within the next 18 months? How strong is the pain in this segment, right? What is the need of the segment? So what will the product need to be? How do you need to adapt the product differently for the segment? Also, what is the willingness to pay, right? So, for example, we had a a company that's in the HR tech space, Series B. They were quite good in acquiring mid-market and enterprise customers. So they were good in their segment, right? And suddenly they wanted to go for the smaller companies and do PLG, product-led growth. So essentially completely new motion, completely new go-to-market, right? So then obviously you need to think about, okay, what's the willingness to pay in this segment? Do I need to adjust something there? And then also, does this market continue to grow in the future? Is growing, right? That's also, I think, an interesting one. For example, everyone is proclaiming SaaS is going to die. Are you focusing on SaaS? Are you focusing now on AI native companies? That could be a question. And then also, do you have a lighthouse customer in this segment already? Do you see some traction, right? And then lastly, how do you know that it will work? So defining some success metrics upfront. So I would say these are the questions. And I think it's true for whether you're kind of defining a new ICP or an early customer profile, or you want to go for a new segment.
Very wise words.
I'm so glad you mentioned crossing the chasm, by the way. I have met very few CEOs and business leaders that actually reference it. I think a lot of them kind of reference it a little bit naturally, but I think it's very much underutilized, and it's such a great framework. If you haven't read it, if you're listening, please go read it. It's like a 3-hour read. It's really fast. But I was wondering if you have any examples of where you're having these conversations with your potential clients and there's just really bad whys. Like, what is a complete red flag to you immediately that, like, this is just not going to work out?
I mean, once you start going into the data, right, you see that, for example, the new segment that they want to go after is churning. Or you look at closed lost reasons and the smaller segment is actually deciding that it's too expensive, or the price is the decisive factor. Although it could also be that they're not bringing the value across properly. But so I think once you start digging into the data, obviously if you're early stage, you won't have that much data. But in our case, talking about this Series B company, they already had quite some data. I have also another example in the compliance space where regulation was coming up to make websites more accessible. And they were like, okay, now we have to go for 3 different segments or even 4 because this regulation affects everyone. And then, I was also looking at closed lost reasons and saw, okay, but I mean, the smaller segment, they most often say, okay, price is an issue, etc. And also the regulation has also a threshold, right? If you're a 10-person company, you don't need to do this. So there's still an ICP, an ideal customer profile, and there is a non-ICP that you want to disqualify. And typically what we say, it's a bit like an onion, right? So 100% of ICP, that is the segment we're building our product for. 80% ICP fit, we still want to get the hand raisers. And we obviously, 100% ICP, we target those companies. And then if it's only 60% ICP fit, you should rather disqualify it because you will spend way too much time on those companies. The sales cycle will be way too long. And then it's, you have to focus your team, right? So they cannot do everything.
I feel like you're going to break someone's mind with the 50% disqualified because 60%, disqualified.
Hates that, but don't we know between the 3 of us that that's the truth? I was actually going to say as well, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were saying that, Anastasia, is also like cost of acquisition. That's a massive problem. So like, what we have seen more typically, I think, is where you've been in the UK and then you're like, we're going to go break America because we can just do that because someone sold you on a dream that that's possible. And what people haven't realized is marketing in America is like 5x more expensive. You know, it's 5 times, 10 times more competitive. You haven't got people on the ground. So they were like, there are like you say, there's almost like a structure of like questions that you need to ask yourself. One of those is, have you actually modeled how much it's going to cost to acquire those businesses? Also, I would always say, like, what relationships do you have with people in the segment as well? Like, I think that's a really important question, because you were talking about the lighthouse customers, but also even amongst the team, like, are there partners? Are there like other collaborators that you have that are like actually involved in that segment? Like, I'm working with a client at the moment who one of their partners has got great relationships with huge enterprises because he's worked in them and they've now built a partnership. So of course they could go into that enterprise segment because he's selling it in. So he's doing the job for them. But that is purely based on the relationship, right? Otherwise there would be no way that you would be able to enter that enterprise segment. And I don't
same
think
same with going from like mid-market to enterprise. Most people, like most companies that are in mid-market, they're like, let's just get bigger customers. They'll pay more money. That must be easy. But the cost of acquiring an enterprise is like...
Well, and the sales cycle goes really long, the cost goes up, the type of people you need on the team goes up, like everything, the infrastructure you need to service those clients changes. There's a whole like operational part, which actually we're going to talk about later, so I'm not going to skip too far. But let's talk about ideal customer profiles a little bit, because we've already touched on those and they're really important. So if you are going to go after a new segment and it's not a proven segment, but you've ticked some of those initial questions off where you can say like, okay, we actually think going after this segment's a good idea. How do you actually validate an ICP for a new segment if you haven't really got any customers in that space already?
Yeah, if you haven't got any customers in that space, otherwise you can pull obviously your customer data, then we always go out and talk to the segment, right? So really try to get at least, 10, 15 interviews to understand, okay, what are their problems? What are they using now? How do they solve those problems now? Is there maybe already a competitor or even like a workaround, right? It doesn't always need to be a direct competitor. It's always just like, I'm using, some kind of workaround with Excel and Claude or whatever. And then, so essentially try to understand their pains, how they work now, what solutions they might already evaluate or might not. Maybe they're not solution aware, they're not problem aware. We don't know that, right? And then that's kind of the qualitative part, of course. If depending on your company stage, again, you would also do a bit of a quantitative analysis. But if you're early stage, I think the interviews would already be telling you a lot. And then you look for similarities, right? So how can you group them? What do they have in common? Like any firmographics, any buying triggers? There's the obvious things like revenue, employee size, but there's also triggers like, okay, there are hiring, or they just raised a Series A and they want to expand their team or have a certain problem, right? They have go-to-market, they have product market fit, but no go-to-market fit, and so on and so forth. So those would be kind of the company level signals. And I would also look for negative flags, right? So we definitely look at things that if we hear those, then we want to disqualify as quickly as possible.
Very sensible advice. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm like, oh, it's so nice to talk to somebody who actually wants to validate this stuff before doing it. It's so not the norm. I don't think I've ever had such a sensible conversation about going after a segment without feeling like I'm losing my mind. So it's quite nice.
There's a lot of divisions with going after new segments. Same problem.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So one of the things that is obviously impacting most tech companies is AI. So whether you now have to put AI powered on every sentence in your website, or you are actually doing something cool with AI, how does that change things? Are we going after companies that work with AI now? Are we positioning ourselves as an AI company? What kind of examples or experiences have you had with that in the last couple of years since ChatGPT blew up?
Yeah, that's a that's a good one. I feel like everyone is just putting AI enabled onto it, but I think it's not always good, to be honest. But maybe I'll talk a little bit about how we are approaching positioning. So typically what we do is analyze the competition and then write for basically every competitive alternative, and that can be obviously direct competitors, but also your do nothing, right? That's the most important, actually, competitive alternative. And I feel like in today's market, it's very, very much the case that people just don't decide because they're a bit of, okay, can I build this with Claude maybe? And so, so you need to be aware of how people are solving it now. And then for each competitive alternative, we look for, okay, what's the unique attributes of my software, right? Based on that alternative. And then we look for value and proof. So typically, these needs to be justifiable numbers, right? So you're saving time, you're saving costs. So something that we can quantify, we can prove, and which is objective and not subjective. And then typically also look for relevant trends. So to create urgency. So why now? Why should you decide for the solution now? And then we come up with this value proposition that is typically 2 pillars. One, the first pillar is typically you define your category for people that might now solve the issue through pen and paper or do nothing or Excel or any other kind of a scrappy way. And then the second pillar is actually where you differentiate yourself against your direct competitors and where you put in the value and proof and you show how you're different from similar solutions. And and coming back to that question, I think if you're in certain industries, this could rather be a negative flag because people are like, okay, GDPR, oh my God, the data is going to the LLMs or whatever. So you need to really, again, be careful. And also, I mean, I think by now it's a standard feature in each product to have AI capabilities, right? So I don't think it's a huge differentiator by now, to be honest. So
yeah, you need more than
you can't just say,
right?
It's that thing of saying if you know what the challenges are that your audience have and your customers have, and AI is part of that solution, I think my view is always, if that is part of the solution, that's fine. If you can articulate why it's part of the solution to the problem that they have. If it isn't, it doesn't need to go in there.
Exactly. And I mean, we always say, like, don't cite your features, right? So of course, like you need to make sure that they get the value. So what's the outcome that you're selling, right? You're selling an outcome. I don't care if it's AI or not AI. I want a certain thing certain job to be done. So
yeah, always lead with the problem. I think that's why it's interesting, isn't it? Because when it comes to like other types of marketing, like even just B2C, it's so obvious that that's the way that people buy. And I think in B2B in particular, we kind of forget that. It's like there's still humans with problems buying your thing. And that's why they bought the thing, because they want to make their life easier.
Exactly, yeah.
It's usually the sort of basic like reasons for buying new product or service, right? So when it comes to kind of product market fit, because again, this is another problem we always talk about on this podcast, Anastasia, that you can't outmarket a bad product. It's quite hard to do that. So when you are entering a new segment, like what are some of the ways that you could potentially figure out if it's the product or if it's the marketing?
I mean, the really quick one is if you see there's great retention, but customers love it once they have it, but you can't get enough of the right ones. It could be rather a marketing problem. If you can get people in, but they don't stick, that's typically a product market fit problem. or they don't use it enough, or they churn. So I think a great test is the Sean Ellis test. I probably know that one. So if you ask this specific segment, how disappointed would you be if this product wouldn't exist any longer? And if 40% to say that they would be very disappointed, then you kind of have product market fit. If not, and then, you have to obviously do it on your segment. So other red flags, I would say, are the sales cycles are extending, even if you have good enablement. Every deal requires some kind of customization, or you need to discount every time to close the deal. And we know that this is a common one, like almost everyone is discounting. You have high churn in the first, 90 days or so. So I would say these are the ones where you say, okay, this is probably a product market fit problem.
Absolutely.
I haven't thought about that question too much, so it's nice to have some like pointers, because you tend to like feel it a little bit, you know what I mean? Where you're like,
Yes.
there's something up here. Like, I don't know if it's the marketing, but it's good to have like some specific numbers to fall back on. Because
in an ideal
is so hard.
Yeah, in an ideal world, if you've got that kind of like, if product and marketing are close, which I would like to see more of in organizations, I don't see a lot of that, to be honest. Even when there's a product marketer, I'm like, we're not as close as we could be. And I think, like marketing has the ability to help with product market fit, because we can obviously feed back a lot of the information, a lot of the data that tells you whether the product market fit is right. Some of the things you're talking about, Anastasia, like, I don't know, like even if you keep trying to run like G2 review campaigns and you never get any reviews out of anybody, it's highly unlikely that it's just the marketing that's the problem. Like I think there are things that we are doing where you can take indication like from what we're doing. Even if your website's got terrible conversion rates, but you're really clear on your website about what you do, and you get lots of traffic and you get lots of people clicking around. I think there are signs, I think, that you could be using, and I'll be honest, like I definitely don't use those enough in conversations with people about product.
Because I definitely don't get asked about them.
No, don't get asked. But we could initiate some of those conversations, couldn't we as marketers? We could be the ones who are like, okay, I've got a set of metrics from marketing that to tell us whether there's a product issue or not.
Yeah.
And then obviously you go out and validate it with some of the numbers that Anastasia's talking about. But you can, like you say, if you want to, I guess, put your finger on the feeling that you're talking about, Ruta, that's the way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I can give another example maybe as well with a customer of ours, where I went out to talk to their customers, like different segments as well, smaller ones, bigger ones. And the customers basically all told me, we're actually not really using the software. We're using, because they had a bit of a software plus service approach. So and most of the smaller companies were only using the service approach, so data protection officer and not the data protection software. And I was like, okay, but you want to be a software company, so we need to figure out who actually uses the software more, who are the power users who actually get value out of it. And so then we discovered that it only makes sense to automate these data privacy things once you're a bigger company. You're rather mid-market, where you have already a legal person that struggles with these problems. And if you're small, you're like, oh, I don't care. Like, I have the data protection officer. You will figure it out. I don't want to do anything with it, right? So, and that was clearly, okay, we apparently don't have product market fit in this particular segment.
I want to ask you a question about that, Anastasia, because obviously Ruta and I do work predominantly with SaaS as well. And there is usually a plus service bit in there. And I have seen the exact example that you're talking about play out, where people want the service first and they want the software second, and sort of the software is a bit of a like added extra. But then what happens is there's pressure from the VCs and the board with the CEO or the founder, because they're like, oh no, we only want to invest where you've got ARR. And service doesn't fall into the ARR category. So how do you tackle that kind of conundrum, because that is quite common.
Yes. Yes. I mean, again, I would try to identify the segment that will most likely benefit from your software, right? And I think you can basically, like the criteria that I said, okay, is it a particular vertical, right? Do they have a particular problem? Is it a certain size of people, certain revenue, or maybe also the team size from when they need something like that, right? For example, we also, with this HR software, for example, they only needed a talent acquisition suite once they actually had a VP of talent acquisition, right? And then they were ready for it. So, but yeah, it's quite interesting. Actually, now with all the AI stuff, that you almost get like the service component first. So some companies even do this forward deployed engineering bit where they go in, they say, okay, we offer you as a service, we will co-develop something, and then we'll see what kind of use case and build it for you customizable. I think that changed a little bit, but if you're a SaaS and you do mostly service, that's a bit of a tricky one, I would say.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of service companies also get funding to then turn into SaaS companies.
Well, yes, that's very common.
Which is also a tricky one because, again, the clients that you were servicing as a service company, there's a lot of service in that, are probably not the same clients that are going to want software, because actually, like, the notion of do it yourself versus someone else doing it for you is already like very different, right? Different persona, different needs. So yeah, we see that a lot as well. So let's go back to something that we alluded to earlier, which is operational readiness. What are some of the operational, I guess, checks and commitments that you need to think about before you try to break into a new segment? So resources, process, people, what are those? Systems.
Yes. So I think the first thing you need to be aware of once you identified a new segment or you decided to go for a new segment, this changes your whole go-to-market. So which means your product needs to be adapted, maybe. Your pricing needs to be adapted, right? So as I said, in the early example of the Series B HR tech, if you were a mid-market enterprise and then you're going for a smaller segment now, SMB or something, then, okay, what's the pricing then? Which go-to-market motion are you now doing to acquire those customers? So is it still outbound? Is it inbound? Is it product-led, account-based, etc.? Then yes, how do you onboard people? The whole marketing bit. So how do you qualify them against your ICP? How you nurture them? How you route them? So essentially everything. So that's why we say, okay, first ICP research, then ICP development. And then once you've taken this decision, you need to do go-to-market team enablement, we call it. So what does that mean for the team? And typically what we do is go into the different teams. And by the way, the teams are obviously already in the development research phase. They're already involved. So they will give their perspective as well. Maybe I forgot to mention that. So the workshopping bit and how sales is selling to various segments. But then the enablement bit is really, what does that mean for your daily work now, right? So if you're in customer success, what does that mean when you were always enterprise and you tended to spend a lot of time on quarterly business reviews with the customers because they're huge clients. You need to make sure you hit the value targets and so on. Now you go for a smaller segment. What does that mean? You cannot do the same, right? You cannot spend as much time because the average contract value is much lower. So you have to do some kind of health check, maybe automated health check. Same for marketing. Okay, your website probably speaks to the enterprise segment, not to the small customer segment. So what do you do? Like, how do you adapt it? What's the messaging? What is the persona you are talking to? Do they do then a free trial, or can they self onboard? So this massive change once you decide that you want to go for a different segment.
It's interesting, Anastasia, because obviously, like, everything you're describing sounds completely rational and pragmatic to us, but the reality is we encounter founders and CEOs all the time that basically are like, yeah, that all sounds great. We'll kind of just do it if we can. What's your sense of that? So I was having a bit of an existential crisis the other day where I was like, maybe Ruta and I are wrong. Maybe we shouldn't do all this pragmatic, logical stuff that's grounded. Maybe we should just be a bit more like these founders that are like, nah, let's just give it a go and let's all just get on board and like stop making it difficult. Is it possible that it can work if you ignore this stuff? That's my first question.
I mean, of course, the other day I had that conversation actually with the founder of an AI native company, very fast growing. And of course, they think, okay, we are vertical agnostic. We're gonna just, do a lot of performance marketing and bring in, I mean, they're also focused on SMBs. Rather than really small customers, and doing a lot of performance marketing. And I think, to start with, I mean, that can work. But what I typically see is after a certain time of acquiring everyone, they see also that a certain segment is churning. They're spending more time on maybe non-good fit customers to onboard them because they're not as technical. And then you spend a lot of internal resources and money on the onboarding bit, and or you spend a lot of money on even acquiring the customers, as you said, so high customer acquisition cost. So typically I say, yeah, you can try that. But then after some time, they come to us. They come back to us. They come back and they're like,
that's what we find.
Yeah, Anastasia, you were right.
If they can make it a year with that mentality, they're doing all right. But generally, I would say after about 6 months, we get messages where they come back and they're like, oh, wait, maybe we shouldn't have.
Yes.
But it's very validating to hear that. It makes me feel less insane.
We had a conversation not too long ago with someone about like going into the market, and we were like, okay, it's a competitive market. There's a lot out there. You're brand new. You don't have like the necessary partnerships, etc. So how would we actually go to market with you launching? And we put together a plan that was like fairly hardcore, because like that is probably what they need to get enough customers to keep going. And it was like an immediate no, because they're at the stage where they're like, oh no, it's fine. Like
everyone's gonna love it.
This is great idea. People are gonna love it. We've got a couple of users, they're gonna love it. And we're like, we hope it's true. We wish you the best of luck. We're here later.
Yeah, we'll still be here.
I thought folks in the UK are better in actually thinking the go-to-market bits earlier in the process.
It's a real, I would probably say out of every 10 people I speak to, there's one that is very logical and reasonable. And the rest are, I don't know. There's a gradient, right? Like some of them are willing to do it, but then you kind of, I feel like with some people you cross over into the like, I want to do all the things that you're talking about, Anastasia. And then the majority are like, absolutely not. And then they have a really hard time. And then we either come back or, or they push on,
They run out of money.
They run out of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel very validated. Obviously, one of the big things in all of this, and you've mentioned it already, is the total addressable market. And we've given examples of people who are like, I'm my tech. And one of the big ones is HR tech. We work with HR tech. We're vertical agnostic. We can sell to anybody and everyone. But actually, that causes a lot of problems, especially if you're going to try and go after a new segment, because you actually can't be all things to everybody. So what are some of the conversations that you have around that, and how do you try and like convince people not to just try and market to everybody?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one I think is the messaging bit, right? So if you say you're vertically agnostic, that means you have to have, because I mean, verticals are still different, right? So if you, for example, decide to do outbound and you say, okay, the verticals are pretty similar in a way that they all have a CFO, for example, just making stuff up. Then the question is still, once you do outbound bid, what message are you sending them? So is it the same for each vertical? Probably not, because they have the CFO in finance vertical versus the CFO in the manufacturing vertical is probably different, has a different problem. And I mean, with the whole AI craze, you're now able to personalize it, right? So you still need to kind of, even if you say, okay, I want to go for various verticals, you still need to adapt the messaging. So that's one point. And I think the most interesting one is that, what I see is why founders are struggling to do a clear or to define a clear ICP is that they think they will leave money on the table. Mm-hmm. But actually the opposite is true, because you will get more revenue from a good fit customer than if you're doing spray and pray and vertical agnostic and whatnot. So I think you will see it in the numbers very quickly. And especially if you're early stage, you need to just focus. You cannot you don't have a huge team to do multiple go-to-market motions, multiple segments, because you need to customize everything for each segment, right?
Yeah. It's interesting as well with the vertical agnostic thing, because I think quite a lot of the founders I speak to anyway would say, oh yeah, but we're doing okay. But actually, if you doubled down, you'd be doing more than okay, wouldn't you? Because I think at the moment they probably don't look at things like the actual wastage and the inefficiency in their marketing spend, in the time their CSMs spend trying to retain, like you say, bad fit customers, in the sales cycle length with bad fit customers. Mm-hmm. You know, there's probably like a bit of work that they do there to kind of maybe surface some of that stuff. I've actually been with a client who's done a repositioning, and what they've discovered is actually their product's great for businesses that have like deskless workers, because they're the customers that we retain the longest, that have the highest adoption of the product, and they used to market like that and they stopped because they wanted to go after everybody, and they've taken a hit. There's churn. So I'm like, now we've repositioned ourselves back against like what the product's actually used for and the type of customers that use it. So I think, yeah, there's a lot to be learned for like actually being like, no, it's okay to be those people. Like it's good. It's a good thing that those people like your product and use it and you retain them, because lifetime value is as important as the instant hit of like getting a contract signed, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially in times where now everyone is questioning how many tools and software you actually have within the company. But yeah, I feel like pulling the data, showing the founder, okay, see, based on the data, we have a bunch of customers that are really not a good fit. We should let them go. I think that helps a lot.
Also, mega scary, and nobody wants to do it because, like, what do you mean we have to let go of customers?
Yes.
Wild.
There is such. I hate the word churn because I feel like it's the thing that scares everyone. But actually, there should be a category of acceptable churn, which is basically bad fit customers. If they're a bad fit from the get-go, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for them. Also, it can create other problems like reputational issues, which I think people then don't think through. It's like, actually, if you've got a bad fit client and they're complaining all the time, what are they actually saying to their network about your business? So I do think that like thinking about it like that as well helps, because it is ultimately, it's like, if you have good relationships with people, you can retain your clients. If you have good product, if you have good service, you know, and you retain people, then people are going to say good things about you. If you don't do that, they're going to say bad things about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Which then makes it all even harder.
Yes, you want to create that flywheel, right?
Absolutely. I wish the flywheel had really taken off, guys. Instead, we're still stuck with this funnel mentality.
True.
It's been an awesome conversation. Yeah, super practical. So if you're listening to this, I hope you've got loads of takeaways and lots of things to look at now that you've got some practical tips to go off. But just to wrap up the episode, we'd love to hear if you've got any marketing gossip for us. So something that you love or you hate, or something that you just can't stop thinking about in the marketing world.
Yeah, so what I hate is actually that everyone is doing the AI-enabled outbound. I feel like everyone is, we don't need marketing. We can just do, a bunch of emails on certain target account lists, and then we'll get our customers. And to be honest, I get like flooded with emails every week, and I think, and bad ones.
Yeah.
Very, very bad ones that are not even personalized. And so I'm not even sure this channel or this motion will prevail. What I love is it's obviously the best time to be in tech. With everything you can automate, like you can automate the boring stuff. You can be more creative now. We're playing around currently with AI agent services. So building agents for nurturing, for lead routing and so on. So I think that's a lot of fun if you, are courageous to test it. And if you know how to set this up, I think it's a lot of fun. Brings back the fun into our profession.
It's almost a bit like you get to play with all this really cool tech, but please use it in the right way.
Yes, I mean, you still need to know your strategy, right? You still need to know your ICP. You still need to understand the buyer decision process. You need to understand, you draft your positioning, because that is essentially the context that you have to give the LLMs and all the tools out there, because just using the tools won't help you.
Yep. Thank you so much, Anastasia. This has been a wonderful conversation. We didn't even get to, creating a new category, which is, I feel like, the ultimate version of a new segment, but that's a whole other conversation. Don't do it.
Trust
unless
me,
you have a lot
we've
of money.
tried. Don't do it.
We've tried. Just unless you have a lot of money and time, don't do it. Thank you so much for this. And yeah, all of Anastasia's details will be down in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in the next episode.